is planned for Duke Power. Okay, the one quick question that was raised to me by our staff, there is a bill impacts panel for public staff that originally everybody had waved cross, and our folks said that they had questions, so some people added cross. Now, my staff has told me all their questions have been answered. So if anybody else wants to wave cross, we can excuse that panel and reduce our time in this room. You don't have to, if you can but reply immediately, that's good, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. I do have a couple of redirect questions for this.
You're talking about public staff, bill impacts.
Oh, yes.
We don't have any costs.
Yeah, we don't have any cross for them.
Okay, you're going to wave cross on bill impacts. I think SIGFR also.
Chair Raleigh, we're willing to make.
Okay, and SIG for Duke and environmental defense.
I'll wait for us.
Thank you. So without objection, we're going to excuse the bill impacts panel. Sir? Yeah, we're on the right. Yeah. Okay, are there any other matters that we need to address before we resume? Okay. Okay, all right, it's it's time for commissioners' questions. And
Chair Brawley,
yes,
I think we didn't get to redirect yesterday.
I apologize.
I have a couple
by all means.
very short questions.
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Stillman and Mr. Tate. Mr. Stillman, I think my questions are for you this morning. Do you recall yesterday, Mr. Felling asking you about Mr. Fahey's recommendation for the companies to file updated load forecasts more frequently?
Yes, I do.
And can you share with the commission roughly how many data requests the companies answered about the spring 2025 forecast that was used to develop the 2025 CPIRP?
I did not count them up, so this is kind of an educated guess based on signing off on a number of those data requests as they come across my desk. But you know, hundreds and hundreds of them. It was substantial.
And that took approximately how much time for the companies to respond to?
I guess the way I think about that is if you put the IRP calendar together, we start developing the forecast for the IRP in January or February of 2025. You know, once we deliver the forecast, a couple of months later, we're working with the IRP team to make sure they understand what we're seeing and they can you know, have visibility into our forecast. We're doing the documentation for the IRP. You know, we have Appendix D that we are responsible for, along with a couple of other things. And then we get into stakeholder meetings, into data requests, and, you know, preparing for this meeting. So it's a full-time job from January of 25 to now. And we've got a couple of teammates that spend a tremendous amount of time really through this whole cycle.
And if Duke Energy were to file updated load forecasts every 6 months, would you expect a similar volume of work and specifically focusing on that post-filing work of showing support for the forecast through requests from the public staff and interveners?
I would be surprised if there were not similar amounts of work requested.
And you mentioned that the economic development portfolio is the biggest driver of change to the load forecast over time. Is that right?
That is what we're seeing right now. Yes.
And So looking at the two load forecast updates that the companies have pulled together in the fall of 25 and the spring of 25, would you say that have there been material changes to the forecast aside from the economic development adjustment?
No, I think the updates to the economic development portfolio, and as we showed in actually my rebuttal testimony, I think is pretty indicative of where the forecast is going.
Thank you. And do you recall Mr. Smith yesterday on behalf of EDF asking you how interveners could analyze and make recommendations that account for the risk of a changing load forecast?
Yes, yes.
And did the companies provide, I think you testified to this, a number of sensitivities with the base load forecast in this case?
Yes, in this case, we provided 4 sensitivities to give a range of options.
And did the high load cap forecast that the companies filed with the CPIRP in October provide a forecast that is roughly in line with what the companies are observing today?
Yes,
And so might that be a way that interveners could account for the risk of a changing load forecast?
most definitely. I mean, that's the purpose of providing the range of options or the couple of sensitivities to the forecast. And you see this really across utilities is they are providing these scenarios or sensitivities to be able to address the risk of each.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, commissioners' questions. Gentlemen, this is a follow-up to some information that came up during cross-examination by Mr. Felling yesterday. You spoke about the approach you use through your large load process to ensure reliability, which includes a cross-functional team that performs a generator capacity evaluation that influences the load ramp. Could you walk the commission through that generator capacity evaluation process? And in this, please be more specific about all the Duke teams that participate in that process and the role each team plays in evaluating a proposed ESA.
Chairman, I can speak to the process in general, the teams that participate in that process. As it relates to specific details of the evaluation that's performed by the generation capacity analysis, the IRP INTAT panel would be better suited to answer that portion of the question. We have I've mentioned a cross-functional team. I think there's at least a dozen, 2 dozen folks that attend a weekly meeting. They're subject matter experts from across the company from a number of different areas. On a weekly basis, that group looks at the existing large load queue. They look at potential new entrants into the large load queue. If a new entrant is deemed to be qualified, that entrant receives a qualification date and then moves forward to the next study. The first study in that process currently is a transmission infrastructure review, because transmission infrastructure has been the predominant driver of timing in the recent past. That team, transmission planners, are represented in that group. They perform that analysis and essentially look at the customer's requested load ramp as compared to the wire's ability and infrastructure's ability to move electrons to support that customer's request. After that's performed, the information is handed to the transmission project management team, who translate that information into any necessary upgrades, what construction or equipment might be necessary to procure, circuit breakers, switching stations, stat comms. And they, in addition to looking at what would be needed to fulfill that, they also estimate the timeline needed to fulfill that. That timeline drives changes to the load ramp. The last part that they perform is an estimated Class 5 cost of interconnection. And that's an important input in our process because it ultimately informs the refundable capital that's asked of those large load customers later in the process if they continue to advance. Following completion of the transmission infrastructure review, it moves to generation capacity planning. And as I said before, they perform an evaluation to determine that the electrons associated with the load ramp that's already been potentially revised by the transmission infrastructure team, that we're capable of delivering those in a manner that's consistent with our system reliability. The specifics of how that analysis is performed can be detailed by the IRP NTAP panel. But following completion of that evaluation, we then have a load ramp that we could provide back to the customer. We have a cost estimate that we can provide back to a customer and a timeline that we can provide back to a customer. And that goes back to them in the form of system impact study results. It also goes back to them in combination with a letter agreement that shows the terms and conditions that they would be held to if they chose to move the project forward. At that point in time, the decision to advance the project or not lies with the customer.
Thank you, sir. I think that was a great deal of information that's useful. What is the role of Mr. Snyder's IRP modeling team in that process? Have there been recent situations where they have been looped into the process given their unique perspective on long-term system planning?
So Mr. Snyder and members of his team are part of that cross-functional team, and they perform the generation capacity analysis that informs the customer's load ramp and our ability to commit to a contract with a customer.
Given that the generator capacity evaluation process may significantly impact the final contracted load compared to the requested demand, what is Duke doing to determine more certainty around the timing and amount of load for each project earlier in the economic development timeline?
So one thing that we provide, and this is long before a large load customer actually enters our queue process or a study is initiated, we try as best we can to provide directional guidance to these large load customers. So for example, if we are aware of system constraints, whether those be generation capacity or transmission infrastructure, we'd like to provide that information prior to someone entering the queue process. So for example, if we know that a recent study produced a long timeline on similar or the same transmission infrastructure, then we can provide in an anonymous form, not the study data, but directional guidance to that customer to say, we think that if you enter a study at this location, that it's likely to produce results similar to these. That information can be valuable because it can either encourage or discourage that large load customer from advancing to a study process. Similar to that, we do a similar thing with as it relates to generation capacity. Even our letter agreements state very specifically that for a prospective customer that their large load may not be reflected in our current integrated resource plan, that net new generation assets may be necessary to serve, and that the company may need to delay service to their project depending on resource availability. So we go to great lengths to be upfront about existing and known system constraints and ones that could be emerging.
Is there an example of peer utilities assuming similar rates of attrition to what Duke has presented?
I don't know that I could point to a very specific example, but it wouldn't surprise you that we are in contact with peer utilities about who's experiencing what from a general perspective, the market opportunity, the waves of growth, how they're dealing with those projects, the systems that have been built in place. So we pay close attention to what's happening in other utilities.
Well, thank you, sir. That's really appreciated the completeness of your answers. That's all the questions I have. Commissioner McKissick.
Just one or two questions. And they go back to the regional projections that you compute related to load growth. I know you've said on a portfolio basis, and I'll use that term, Bart, looking at the letter agreements, those in the pipeline, as well as those that have signed ESAs. It's about a 23% discount rate. I think you said it was involved in terms of projecting what that growth was. Now, it was my understanding, and I think in response to a question from the public staff attorney, that when it comes to ESAs, those are kind of, if it's a signed ESA, you kind of attribute all of the load that the signed ESAs are contributing toward the generation. But when it came to letter agreements and those in the pipeline, it seems like based upon what I've read before, they're like discounted like, at least 30% or so, or whatever that number may be. Can you clarify how that works? Yes, so I'm clear on it.
Yes, and if you don't mind, I'll kind of go back
Sure.
in history and start with our first portfolio and work forward.
Yes.
So when we delivered the portfolio for the SPA, so the larger portfolio, that the 35 entities that were in that, at that time, we did not recognize the certainty of the levels of who has signed a letter agreement, who has signed an ESA. We took the portfolio as a total and applied a discount over the course of time. I think as you got out in time, we applied about a 20% discount or so for the portfolio in total.
Sure.
And I think public staff, Witness Fahey has a table in their rebuttal that says, hey, the experience that you actually saw was some level of certainty between the ESAs and the LAs in the late stage pipeline. But just looking at those 35 entities and what happened to them a year later as we prepared the 2025 portfolio, we took a lot of the lessons learned. This was pre-Q, but Mr. Tate and his team and my team worked very closely together to get a much more robust understanding of ramp rates and what the customer needs were. And we updated that 2025 portfolio. And we identified actually a drop in load of those 35 entities by between 40 and 50%. So that's why you see some recommendations that have been made to say, hey, going forward, that's probably what you should use. The information that wasn't known in those recommendations are all the improvements that we've made along the way to understand the levels of certainty and all of the processes that Mr. Tate has been talking about. So what we've done is in the 2025 portfolio, we considered both the level of certainty. So the ESAs, we did not discount. Letter agreements, we discounted at 25%. And I think there were 3 late stage pipelines that we discounted at 30%.
Okay.
So we recognize that, but we also want to look at the portfolio in total. So there's really 2 tests that we go through. That is the first one. The second one is when you accumulate all that together, are you coming up with a reasonable discount or haircut to the expected load that's coming in? And that's why I keep saying in total, the portfolio was discounted 23% because it was primarily made up of letter agreements. I think that was 80% of the portfolio.
Well, that clarifies it because I just want to make sure that I understood exactly the approach you were taking at this time. Now, there's been quite a bit of discussion about the impact of economic development reporting and how it comes in and how it affects your, semi-annual reports with low growth. I mean, and of course, right now we're talking about 6-month intervals. And to what extent do you think it would help those looking at the numbers coming in from you if rather than coming in like semi-annually, they came in like every 4 months or so, like 3 times a year? Is that something that would present a challenge? Would that be something that could be done that might perhaps provide a greater glimpse at changes that are taking place, incrementally? So, perhaps further analysis could be done.
It is definitely something that could be done. Yes. What I would point back to is the last 3 semi-annual reports that we filed. So in the spring of 2025 and in the fall of 2025, those portfolios looked very similar. I think if you narrow the timeline, we'd start to see maybe movement up and down as companies went in and out. So I personally like the 6-month window to allow some of the noise to move out. If you looked at it every month, it would be moving back and forth. So I like that 6-month period. And I think, going from the fall of 25 to the spring of 26, we just had, it was, I think, a perfect alignment of where some companies had approached us at one time and they were moving through the queue very quickly. I think the processes that we have in place today will monitor that much more closely, and we won't see those kind of jumps again.
Okay. And I guess another issue that's in the back of my mind is ESAs and the way now they're kind of customized. There's been some discussion about having uniform ESAs, as well as curtailment provisions provided in those ESAs. And I know you have moved to curtailment recently, but what are your thoughts about that type of transition and how that might impact the projections that you're doing?
Can I ask Mr. Tate to start that, and then I'll
Sure.
pick it up on the projections?
So as it relates to the ESAs, I believe we filed through this proceeding our pro forma template large load ESA. That is the standard that we start with. I think some of the data requests that we received talked about how we negotiate ESAs. These are not highly customizable documents. These documents have very little room for adjustment, and that is because we work in, to treat similarly situated customers with the same treatment. Mr. Felling asked, I think in direct, about how our large load terms and conditions have evolved, how we've improved our process over time, dating back to when service regulations were updated in January of 2024. Our ESAs track that evolution of improvement in this space, and curtailment is now a standard feature in our large load ESAs.
And I understand it's a standard feature of them, but the magnitude of curtailment, is that uniform or is that negotiated with each particular customer or large load entity that comes along? I mean, that's what I'm trying to really drill down into. How much flexibility is there?
Currently, each large load customer that signs a ESA with curtailment as a feature, they have an option. They can choose 50% of their load for 95 hours per year. I'm sorry, they can choose 95% of their load for 50 hours a year, or 50% of their load for 100 hours a year. That is the option that they have to choose. Otherwise, what they are committing to in that agreement is for a 5-year term that starts at energization that we have the right to reduce in our sole discretion. So the only latitude that exists in that space is that optionality for the customer to choose the number of hours per year and the percentage of their load that would be impacted.
So I read about the 95% for up to 50 hours a year. So that is indeed a policy that's being followed today.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess that kind of concludes questions I had in the back of my mind. I wanted to get some clarification on those details, so thank you.
Commissioner Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning again, gentlemen. I think 2 quick questions. Recently in a earnings call with Duke, an analyst expressed concern about the fact that there would be data centers that could be leaving despite the fact that they have an ESA. Is that true? And is that a concern? And has that happened?
Commissioner, I don't believe I've seen a data center with an executed ESA leave or seek termination of that ESA in my tenure with Duke. Could it happen? Yes, sir. And that possibility, because it exists, is the reason why we've included termination damages, liquidated damages as it relates to the revenue over a 15-year plus period. It's the reason why we've included minimum billing demands. It's the reason why we've included refundable capital as it equates to the cost of interconnection. And it's the reason why we've included security requirements around those liquidated damages. So we have attempted to construct a process that protects against and mitigates the risk associated with either termination or a failure to materialize.
Okay. Somewhat of a follow-up to that. So in April, when you released the fact that, thought I had it all. Excuse me, Jim. In April, when you released those numbers, that a number of the letters of intent had moved to ESAs. Is that correct? Is that what happened?
Yes.
Between the last submission of information to this April, a number of those had moved. I think I heard you say that, didn't I, Ms. Stillman?
You're exactly correct. So there was a number in that earnings update in April, there were four entities that moved from what we would consider a letter agreement to an ESA.
Okay. With that having happened, and you would be due, I guess, in October for another submission of reporting on this sequence of documents and the status of the ESAs. Was it a surprise to you that that happened between 2025 and April of 26?
I don't think it was, I wouldn't call it a surprise. This, as we look at the pipeline, we've got those entities, some of those entities identified as letter agreements, some as having attained an ESA. As Mr. Tate said, we meet weekly to understand the progress of these, of where these are going. So I don't know that it was a surprise. I think they just all came in at the same time.
Okay. Those four entities, how many, what was the megawatts total for those four entities?
2,645
Okay.
in that area.
And this is my last question. So you're going to report to us again in October on the semi-annual, biannual report. And of course, I think these folks moving to ESAs triggered the increase or zeal to add a couple more gas plants to try to serve the load. Do you anticipate the same thing happening in October, that you're going to have people move to ESAs and another 2,000 megawatts, and then are we going to put two more gas plants on, or how do we plan for that? Or when does Duke reach the saturation point that they can't serve these customers and just tell them no?
Right. So a couple of thoughts there. The first thought is the movement of those entities from the letter agreement stage to the ESA was not really what pushed our forecast up, our economic development portfolio up. I think I'd mentioned yesterday in our advancing development portfolio that was part of this IRP. We had the advancing development portfolio, and then we had 2,000 megawatts of expected future growth. And the update that we saw in January of this year, that 2,000 that we had expected in the advancing development came to fruition. So that's part of the advancing development. I think what caused the forecast to increase was the continued expectation of that pipeline to ultimately move up through and take generations. So using the queue that Mr. Tate has described, we looked at those entities that were in the queue, identified the entities that were in the queue and took 50% of those and put those in to recognize future growth. And we did that in concert with all of the safeguards that Mr. Tate talked about.
Okay, so you pick and choose, Mr. Tate, I guess your question, do you pick and choose who, or is it by dates of when they fell in the queue that you move certain entities up in the queue to serve them? How does that work?
Large load customers enter the queue when they're qualified and they have a qualification date. That date puts them in a serial order that dispositions their evaluations, but also their opportunity to sign an agreement. And so we treat that as a very rigid structure to present opportunities. You reference, at what point will we say no because we're saturated? The way our system works is, well, first and foremost, we operate under the banner of an obligation to serve. But the way our queue system works is it won't produce a no response. It would produce a response to say, hey, the earliest we can serve you is this year because of transmission infrastructure or generation capacity
Okay.
constraints.
Okay, all right. In the queue today, as you know it, gentlemen, and neither one of you can answer that, what percentage is data centers and what percentage is industrial customers that create jobs in different areas? As we talked before about Greensboro and a few other, what's the split?
Give me 1 minute and I could tell you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You take your time. We've only been here a week and a half.
So in terms of companies, it's about a 70-30 split. So 70% data center, 30% manufacturing. In
Okay.
terms of megawatts, it's about a 90-10 split. And that is the developing pipeline that was used to inform the spring 2026 update. So
Okay.
there's been movement since then. I don't exactly know what that movement has been.
That's fair enough. Okay, thank you, sir. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
All right, questions on commissioner questions? So, AGO, Avon, CC. All right,
Chair Burley, good morning. Benson from Microsoft, if I'm the next up.
I think you may be. Is there anybody else? Just give me a hands up so I'll know. Okay, Microsoft Public Staff.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. Just following up on Commissioner Brawley's question about how Duke ensures that ESAs will not cause reliability issues. Mr. Tate, right at the end of that discussion, you noted that customers signing letter agreements and ESAs know and acknowledge, and I'm paraphrasing you here, that Duke may need to delay service if necessary due to resource adequacy concerns. Do you recall that?
Yes, I referenced that specific language that exists in our large load pro forma letter agreements.
Thank you. So to be clear, under the letter agreement and an ESA, Duke would have the right to delay energizing a large load customer if it were to conclude that following the load ramp in the ESA could cause reliability problems?
Our letter agreements and ESAs are informed by studies that that meet the reliability threshold prior to a contractual commitment. Our letter agreements specifically state that the load being requested may not be included in our current IRP, and additional net new generation may be necessary to serve. But to be clear, we would not enter into a contract with a commitment to serve if we did not believe we could meet that commitment.
Understood it. And you discussed, I believe, the studies that Duke does to try extremely hard to ensure that reliability will not be compromised by providing service to a customer, right?
Yes.
Okay, but you would agree that Duke, if due to there were changed circumstances, and the results of those studies were no longer valid, Duke would not in any event commence delivery of service to any customer if, in the view of Duke's system operators, that would undermine the reliability of the system.
I believe that to be true, but I think it might be a better question for the reliability panel.
Okay, understood. And you had a brief discussion with Commissioner McKissick about the curtailment provisions of the ESAs. Those are provisions that Duke has negotiated in certain ESAs to help ensure that delivery of service to those specific customers will not cause reliability problems.
That's correct.
Okay. And if a customer that did not accept curtailment provisions could enter into an ESA, but that would potentially impact the date on which they could get their project energized. Is that right?
Currently, if it's a 100 megawatt plus customer, then curtailment is a required but temporary provision in ESAs.
All right, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Public staff?
Thank you, Chair Brawley. Gentlemen, I just have, I think, one question kind of split into two subparts in response to Commissioner Tucker's question about data centers that had backed out of their signed ESAs, kind of inquiring whether that has happened or to your awareness. So my first question is, if you recall, Ms. Bowman testified on direct that data center load was about 1%, if I have that figure right, of current load in the North Carolina retail system. So assuming that figure is correct, would you agree that data centers are kind of in their infancy in North Carolina and the load is projected to come? Like we haven't really seen the data center load. It's on its way. Is that fair?
So the number is a little bit higher, but not much. And we do serve a number of data center loads. I think the difference of what we're seeing now is it's a different type of data center that is approaching us. So I don't know that I would say it's in its infancy. We have experience with data centers. We serve, if I were to guess, well, I'm not even going to guess a number, but there's a large number of data centers that we serve. So we have experience with that. But I do think that this is a wave of different type of data centers.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe I didn't ask the question well. I think what I'm trying to get at is the magnitude and load growth that we are expecting to see from data centers is far surpassing the current load from data centers. Is that fair?
Yes.
Thank you. And my next question is, in terms of ESAs that have been signed from customers in the economic development pipeline, have there been industrial customers who have backed out of their ESA or put their ESA on a delay or otherwise terminated their signed ESA, to your knowledge?
Yes. When we look at the changes, and I was talking to Commissioner McKissick about the changes from the portfolio from 24 to 25. There were not at that point, but going from 25 to 26, I believe we saw, and I'm going to be roughly right, I think it was 3 manufacturers that had ESAs that we chose to take out of the forecast. Yes.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Duke?
No questions.
All right. Gentlemen, I believe y'all are done with these witnesses, so they can be excused.
Yes, I would ask for them to be excused.
Gentlemen, you're excused.
Thank you.
I'm sure you will miss being here next week. Okay. Our next panel is Duke rebuttal, bill impacts and large load benefits.
Yes, Chair Brawley, thank you very much. This time, Duke Energy calls to the witness stand Ms. Laura Bateman and Mr. Morgan Beveridge.
Ms. Bateman, I believe you've already been sworn, but Mr. Beveridge, have you been sworn?
I have not.
Would you prefer to swear or affirm?
Swear is good.
Left hand on the Bible, please. Raise your right hand. Do you swear that testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Duke, you're a witness.
Thank you very much. Beginning with you, Ms. Bateman, would you please state your name and business address?
Yes, my name is Laura Bateman and my business address is 411 Fayetteville Street, Raleigh, North Carolina.
And is this the same panel that provided direct testimony or have there been changes to the configuration?
Yes, it is not the same. For my direct testimony, I appeared with witness Mark Hoots as part of the Carolinas Utility Operations Panel. And today I appear with witness Morgan Beveridge as part of the Bill Impacts and Large Load Benefits Panel.
Thank you very much. And we'll turn to you now, Mr. Beveridge. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Morgan Beveridge, and my working address is 525 South Tryon Street, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28202.
Thank you. And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Business Services as Director of Rates and Regulatory Strategy.
And can you briefly describe your roles and responsibilities?
I am in charge of rate design, rate analytics, and load research across all of our electric jurisdictions.
Thank you. Turning back to you, Ms. Bateman, on May 14th, 2026, did this panel cause to be pre-filed in the docket rebuttal testimony consisting of 21 pages and one exhibit?
Yes,
And on June 16th, 2026, did the panel cause to be pre-filed in the docket corrected rebuttal testimony consisting of 21 pages and one exhibit?
yes.
Do you have any additional changes to make to your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
No, I did not.
If I were to ask you the same questions that today that appear in your pre-filed testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes,
Does your rebuttal testimony contain any any confidential information?
no, it did. No, it does not.
And does your exhibit contain any confidential information?
Yes. Oh, wait. Yes,
I believe panel's rebuttal
Yes.
exhibit contains some confidential
Yes.
information, correct?
yes, it does.
Did you also prepare and cause to be pre-filed a summary of the panel's rebuttal testimony?
Yes,
Thank you very much, Chair Brawley. At this time, I would ask that this panel's corrected rebuttal testimony and rebuttal testimony summary be entered in the record as given orally from the stand, along with marking their one rebuttal exhibit pre-marked for identification, which contains confidential information, and I would move that to be accepted into the record as well.
Okay, Mr. Jarak, I noticed on an earlier panel, we had people that were working on off of uncorrected testimony and didn't have corrected. I would like to admit both so that if somebody's on the wrong one, we can,
I defer to you on that, Commission.
in an excess of caution.
Okay.
The rebuttal testimony of Laura Bateman and Morgan Beveridge, 21 pages, one confidential exhibit as filed in May 14, 2026, and same testimony corrected as filed June 16, 2026, are identified and admitted to the record as if given orally from the stand today. The rebuttal witness summary as filed June 15th, 2026 is also identified and admitted into evidence as if given orally from the stand today.
Thank you very much. The panel is available for cross-examination.
The AGO had previously reserved cross for this panel. We waived that cross.
Thank you, ma'am. CCBA. Okay.
Chair Brawley, I think CCBA's counsel relayed via email yesterday or last night that they were waiving cross. Duke can correct me on that.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Sigford.
Thank you, Chair Brawley. I actually do have some questions. Good morning, Ms. Bateman, Mr. Beveridge. My name is Peter Ledford, and I'm here on behalf of the Carolina Industrial Group for Fair Utility Rates. I'd like to talk about your testimony where you're generally rebutting the testimony for witness Fitzhenry, which is more or less on pages 13 through 17 of your testimony. I'd like to start with a few questions about bill impacts specifically. On page 15 of your rebuttal at lines 9 through 12, you testified that the companies have already provided bill impacts for residential and commercial customers in Discovery
The company's confidential response to data request NCSEA DR 3-8, to which SIGFR has access, is attached here too as bill impacts and large load benefits panel confidential rebuttal exhibit 1. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to have SIGFR potential exhibit 100 marked as SIGFR cross bill impacts and large load benefits panel direct exhibit 1. And Ms. Bateman, on top of the, actually it's on the chair next to you. The very top binder should have this in it.
Yeah, that was. Would you approve of your potential cross exhibit?
Yes, sir. It was number 100. And it is DEC and DEP response to SIGFR data request 14-4.
Yes, I have it.
Thank you.
Okay, SIG4, cross, large load panel, on redirect, or excuse me, direct exhibit 1, your exhibit 100
Yes,
is
sir.
identified for the record. And without objection, admitted.
Thank you, sir. Would you all agree that in this data request, SIGFR asked how a confidential response to a data request from another party educates the company's large load customers about the rate impacts of the company's proposal?
Yes.
And in response, the companies provided a non-confidential but simpler version of the previously provided data request?
Yes.
I'm trying to work out how this is sufficient to inform the company's industrial customers about the bill impacts of the company's proposal. Because a residential customer can read the company's CPIRP and see their estimated bill impacts. Is that accurate?
Yes.
But for an industrial customer, they need to join a trade association that intervenes in these proceedings and has access to discovery, or they need to intervene in their own name, as some have done in this proceeding. Is that accurate?
No. And so I'll explain. I think I stated earlier when I was appearing on my direct testimony that commercial and industrial customers are much more diverse than our residential customers. And so for a residential customer, we typically talk about a typical residential bill, 1,000 kWh. But when you think about commercial and industrial customers, the size of the customer can vary, very significantly. We're talking about data centers, we're talking about, small local businesses. There's just really no typical bill. And so what we try to do in this data request to try to be helpful is provide a drop down. And I think we had 9 options that you could select from for industrial customers. And I think it was 6 options for commercial customers to be able to select your load for a typical bill. And so it really is going to depend on the individual customer's usage and their load profile in order for them to understand the impacts on their bill. But what I will say is that the percentage, the CAGRs that we present in the CPIRP can be applied to all of the customer classes. And so if you're a commercial or industrial customer and you know your specific bill, you could apply those same percentage increases to your bill to get an estimate of what the impact will be on your bill.
So I'm clear, industrial customers should look at the compound annual growth rate and apply that to their bill using their own spreadsheet, more or less.
That would be a reasonable way to do it.
Okay. And I want to stick to this discussion about the compound annual growth rate. You state on pages 13 through 15 of your testimony that you disagree with witness Fitzhenry's recommendation that the companies provide an all-in bill impact. Is that correct?
Yes.
And specifically on page 13, lines 17 to 18, you testify that the PVRRs or present value revenue requirements have never included all future revenue requirements of the utility, but only those caused by the resource plans.
Correct.
And so that CAGR would not include
all future revenue requirements, just those caused by the resource plans.
Correct, just those relevant to this proceeding.
So can you help explain to me what sort of revenue requirements would not be caused by the the resource plan?
Storm costs, certain grid improvement, hardening, resiliency type investments probably would not vary from portfolio to portfolio, so wouldn't be relevant in selecting an appropriate portfolio.
Now, the companies do have a good idea of those resilience and hardening programs costs, correct?
Not over a 15-year period.
But they do have enough visibility in order to propose them in a multi-year rate plan application, correct?
Yes, and so over a 2 or 3 year period, kind of a shorter time frame, we do present those plans to the commission, and in a multi-year rate plan, we do fix those costs over a 2 or 3 year period, and the rates for customers over that 2 or 3 year period for the base rates. So I would say for a 2 or 3 year period, that's much more reasonable. And I will also note that, on this topic, I've asked in discovery in the last 3 CPIRP proceedings if SIGFR is aware of any other utility that does this, that provides all-in bill impact projections over a 15-year period. And the answer has consistently been no. The commission has ruled on this previously as well. And I just don't think it's a reasonable request. And given that no other utility does it, I think that's very informative, that it's really unrealistic to expect a utility to have this crystal ball of all costs and provide a bill impact that customers think this is exactly what my bill is going to be in 10 or 15 years, when that's not the case.
Well, you're aware that SIGFR only works in North Carolina, correct?
Yes.
And SIGFR only participates in proceedings, SIGFR 2 and 3 involving Duke, and SIGFR number 1 involving Dominion, correct?
Yes.
So SIGFR wouldn't have visibility to what's done in 49 other states?
I would disagree with that, because SIGFR uses consultants that testify in other states.
Okay. I'd like to ask some questions about the present value revenue requirement and how that has evolved over time. Subject to check, would you agree that in the sub 179 proceeding, the PVRR of the company's proposals ranged from 95 billion to 101 billion in 2050?
I think that question would be better addressed by the NTAP and modeling panel.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Witness Bateman, Witness Beveridge. Mr. Chair, I have no further questions.
Who got CUCA?
CUCA has no questions at this time. Yeah, no questions at this time.
Microsoft has no questions.
CSBA has no questions.
Good morning. I'm just gonna get set up and I'll get started. Just a moment. Good morning, Menashe Magaru for Say et al. Unless I flag otherwise, my questions for the panel. So whoever feels most comfortable responding, just feel free to do so. Lastly, the page and line numbers I'll be using, I hope, correspond to your corrected rebuttal testimony as opposed to the initially filed rebuttal testimony that you filed. So, so on page 6, and can you hear me? On page 6 of your testimony, beginning on line 6, you provide more specifics on what your testimony refers to as the large load impacts analysis. Just let me know when you're there.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. So in short, this analysis focuses on 16 total projects with ESAs that were included in the spring 2026 large load report, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And so that report was filed in the sub 208A docket, correct?
I don't have that docket here, but subject to check.
Subject to check, okay. Would you generally agree that the company's reports in that docket are required to update the commission? And I'm quoting directly from the spring 2026 large load report filing that you cite and reference on the continued economic development and pipeline of large load additions at or greater than 20 megawatts. Does that sound about right?
That sounds correct.
Okay. Okay, so skipping to page 10, line 6 of your testimony, and just let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
All right, you note that 87% of the load covered in this analysis originates from projects with a contract demand of at least 100 megawatts. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so meaning 13% of the projects that were analyzed originate or have contract demand, I should say, scratch that, of less than 100 megawatts.
No, not necessarily. The 87% there was specifically referencing a 15-year ESA, and we can't have 15-year ESAs for contracts under 100 megawatts as well. And so if I look at customers above 100 megawatts, I believe that was about 40% of the ESAs included in that spring report.
All right, let me ask this a different way because I think the way I asked it was confusing. And I'll just ask the question directly. What percentage of the projects that were included in that analysis had contract demand of less than 100 megawatts? Because my math might have been wrong.
I believe it was 15 projects, which would have been 60% of the ESAs, but that accounts for a much smaller percentage of the actual load. It would have been 17% of the load.
17% have less than 100 megawatts of contract demand in the analysis. Okay, thank you.
Using some quick math here, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Math has never been my strong suit. Okay, so I don't think this would be divulging confidential information given the testimony that has been offered already in this hearing, but you would agree that the company's model ESA that's been filed with the commission, obviously interveners that are not public staff have not seen it, but you would agree that that model ESA, and this was filed, I think, September 4th of last year, that only applies to large load customers that have 100 megawatts or more of contract demand.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so going to page 6, lines 12 through 13 of your testimony, just let me know when you're there.
You say the line numbers again, please?
Yeah, it's 12 through 13 of your testimony.
Okay.
All right. So you note there that the company's assumed projects will achieve 95% of the contract demand.
Yes.
Okay. However, as we just discussed, the company's filed model ESA has protections. Those protections, to the extent that they include minimum contract demand, those requirements or enforcement restrictions, those would not necessarily apply to projects with less than 100 megawatts.
Yes, that's true. We do have minimum billing demands and other protections through our standard service regulations and rate schedules, but the large load protections only apply above 100 megawatts.
Got it. All right. I think we're still on. Sorry, just bear with me. So staying on page 6 of your testimony, lines 10 through 11. Just let me know when you're there.
I am.
All right, you note that this analysis only includes load coming into service January 2025 or later. You see that?
Yes.
All right, so going to page, sorry to be jumping around, going to page 8, line 9 of your testimony.
I'm there.
You note, and I'm paraphrasing here, that your analysis starts tracking the potential benefits from large load customers over a 15-year period beginning in 2029.
That's right.
Okay. So there's, just rough math, a 4-year gap that's not covered by the analysis.
Yes, there's 4 years of load that is included in the analysis that is ramping up between 25 and 29. That's not or 25 and 28. That's not included in the results shown here.
Okay. All right. So going back to page 6 of your testimony, line 14.
I'm there.
All right. You note that this analysis only compares the demand rate related revenue from each large load project with fixed costs or revenue requirements of new generation and transmission built to serve each large load project. You see that, and there's some slight paraphrases there.
You said page 6, line 14?
Yeah. And maybe that is
Can
one
you
of the
read
pages.
that again? I didn't.
Yeah. And I'm going to actually pull this from the corrected testimony just so I know that I've got the right one. So bear with me here. Yep. All right. So I'm looking at your corrected rebuttal testimony. This is page 6, line 14, and I'll read the actual passage as it appears. For the calculation of revenues, the analysis considers each customer's contribution to fixed, non-variable, non-fuel costs only, based on the representative demand rate and the load ramp in their ESA. You see that?
Yes.
All right. And I think further on, and this is where I was sort of paraphrasing, when we're thinking about sort of the costs that are being assumed or compared, the companies were only looking at generation and transmission investments that were being built to serve these new projects. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, just going off of what we've just discussed, would you agree then that this analysis does not consider the cost impacts that these new large load projects might have on already existing generation and transmission assets?
I guess I'm not following what you mean. How would they have cost impacts on existing generation?
Well, obviously this is cross-examination, but just to clarify, these projects are going to potentially cause existing generation to maybe run more frequently than it would to serve that load or to serve just general system load in addition to these larger projects, just to give an illustrative example.
Yeah, I would say the investments that we're looking at and comparing to the revenues for these customers are large. We're looking at enough generation to cover their base load and their reserve margin. We're looking at transmission investments for interconnection, for network upgrades, for integrating this new generation. And so that is covering a large portion of the system that's going to be serving or incremental system to serve this load. And the net benefits that we speak about, the 3.6 billion over 15 years, those benefits go towards offsetting costs for other customers, and those costs could include existing costs in the system or other fixed costs.
But going off your testimony, what I'm seeing here is that the only set of costs that are being assumed or compared in this analysis are already existing, not already existing, scratch it. It's comparing investments that are specifically being built to serve these projects. Is it your testimony that this analysis also includes existing investments?
No, I think that's an important distinction to make. We don't build generation assets for particular customers or particular projects. Same is true for network upgrades. They may be driven by pipeline of load and a load forecast that can include certain projects. And at this scale, it starts to get on the scale of these type of generation investments. But these customers will be served by the full system. And so these costs that we're showing that large load customers would cover will also go to serve other customers, just like some existing generation would go to serve these large load customers. And so it wouldn't be correct to say that these new large loads should fully cover all costs for these new investments, as well as additional, capacity on the grid today. because this is not trying to estimate or simulate exactly how these customers are going to be served, because again, they're going to be served from the grid as a whole. This is really a financial comparison for the incremental cost relative to the new revenues that these customers bring on.
And I would just add that we did do 2 analyses and presented them in this testimony. And so Mr. Beveridge's analysis that you're talking about looked at the incremental cost to serve these customers. So what has to be added to the existing system to serve these customers, and compare that to the revenue that we would receive from them. And that's where he shows a benefit. In addition to that, we showed how we typically allocate costs and design rates on the system in the bill impacts analysis, where we added the incremental cost to the system and then allocated the full system costs to these customers. And that, again, we're showing benefits, lower bill impacts. So I think looking at it, we've looked at it both ways and we see benefits.
Understood. I think I got what I needed there with regards to sort of your characterization of this as sort of only looking at the incremental impacts.
For one of the 2 analyses.
For one of these analysis, and we'll talk about the bill analysis a little later. And this is just, I'm just pulling straight from your testimony here. The analysis does not consider or include variable or fuel costs, correct?
Correct.
But obviously these customers that are associated with these system projects, they will have some impact on system fuel costs.
They will. This analysis focused on capital investments, because I think that part of the question is, will our standard pricing using average embedded cost rate making from these customers bring enough revenue to cover the incremental cost to serve the load? These customers can be assumed to cover their variable costs because those costs scale with kilowatt hour usage. And so their energy charges will cover those costs. And so if we included that in this analysis, it would really be adding a similar amount of costs on the cost side of the equation as well as the revenue side of the equation, and it wouldn't change the kind of net benefit. And so that's why this focus specifically on your incremental capital investment.
Okay. So we go to page 7. So next page, line 6 through 17 of your testimony. Just let me know when you're there. And let me make sure that I actually have the right and gave you the right line site there. Looks like I did.
I think I'm there.
Yeah. So you note here that your analysis is assuming that the incremental generation that would be needed to serve these projects would be combined cycle and combustion turbines.
Yes, for modeling purposes for this analysis.
Right. However, given the time frame of this analysis, which is 2029 through 2043, excuse me, it's possible, just to give an illustrative example, that advanced nuclear would be one of the generation assets or resources that could be used to help facilitate the integration of these new projects.
This analysis went through, let's see. Okay, yes. So we used combined cycle and combustion turbine generation as a representative technology for this calculation. Again, these customers will be served from the system, and we have a diverse portfolio on the system and a diverse resource plan. But these are representative technologies for this kind of revenue requirement modeling.
And again, I'll just note the 2 different analyses. Mr. Beveridge's uses incremental. The bill impact analyses did include new nuclear and the cost of those new nuclear, and as well as the the full cost of the system for the portfolio.
Got it. You would agree, though, notwithstanding the fact that you're using simplifying assumptions here, that the capital cost for an advanced nuclear facility would be on a per kW basis greater on average than the combined cycle.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. So I have 2 last questions, I think, about the large load impacts analysis. So going back to page 6, I have lines 15 through 16 here, but let me just make sure that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. You note here that the revenue in question that your analysis centers on is from the large load customer demand rates. You see that?
It says based on a representative demand rate.
Representative demand rate. All right. With that caveat, you would agree that? With that caveat that you provided that it's a representative demand rate, would you agree that that's what your analysis was centering on?
Yeah.
And I mean, we talked about this earlier, but you're generally aware that the company's ESAs with these large load customers of at least 100 megawatts contain curtailment provisions, excuse me.
Yes.
Meaning that there might be some instances during this 15-year review or analysis timeframe where these large load customers are maybe not paying that full representative demand rate.
So these demand charges would be billed on a monthly basis and set by a maximum demand over the course of a month. And so even if curtailment was used, it wouldn't affect demand charges.
Okay. Let's see. This has maybe been answered already. Okay. So lastly, on page 10, lines 7 through 10 of your testimony, just let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
All right. You know, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm happy to read the exact quote if you're not there and situated, that this large load impacts analysis is conservative because you expect most of these customers will extend their 15-year term ESAs.
Yes.
All right. Obviously, we discussed this earlier with regards to the model ESA and how there are specific provisions. You'd agree that a certain subset of these projects may have contract terms that are less or shorter than 15 years.
Yes, a subset of the projects in the spring 2026 report that show up in this analysis would have less than 15-year term.
And obviously, we heard testimony earlier today, but you would agree generally that it is possible that some of the large load customers with this 100 megawatts or more contract demand could, for economic or financial reasons, decide to terminate their ESAs before the 15 years are up.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's move to the large load bill impacts analysis. And can we go to page 13, lines 7 through 8 of your testimony? Just let me know when you're there.
Okay, I'm there.
All right. And so you discussed this with counsel for Sigford, but obviously this analysis does not provide an all-in bill forecast of any of the customer classes, correct?
Correct.
All right. And in addition, the companies have not filed, emphasis on filed, any sensitivities of this large load bill impacts analysis.
Which I'm not sure that I agree with that. We've provided, if you're talking about the bill impact section of our testimony, we provided bill impacts on the large load sensitivity that was run in the IRP, but also on the recommended portfolio, the base portfolio. There's a few other portfolios or sensitivities that we provided bill impacts on.
Okay, let me say this maybe a little bit more specifically. The companies have not filed a sensitivity setting out the bill impacts if less than all of the large load for a particular portfolio that was studied, if that fails to materialize.
We have not put forth bill impacts on a portfolio where we assume that we build all of the generation in the high load sensitivity, but then remove some of the load. And I think that's reasonable, though. The panel that was just up here talked about protections that we have in place if customers were to terminate or reduce their load. And then on top of that, there's a pipeline. They also talked about a pipeline of customers. And if a customer reduces their load or leaves, obviously you would check and adjust, and you might not build the same resources that you originally had in the plan.
Understood. Obviously, I don't want to rehash this, but you would agree, obviously, the ESAs and service regulations apply to certain subsets of the large load customers, specifically the ESAs, for example.
But as I think I heard Mr. Beveridge say, it's the significant majority of the megawatts.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So just one remaining set of questions. Beginning on page 18, line 13, just let me know when you're there.
Yes.
All right. You discussed the inclusion of QUIP in rate base. Do you see that?
Yes.
All right. So if you go to page 20, lines 1 through 3, let me know when you're there.
Yes.
All right. You note that the companies assume QUIP and rate base treatment for 3 sets of assets or resources, offshore wind, advanced nuclear, and combined cycles. You see that?
I don't think that's correct. What I say is that we assumed the CWIP treatment for baseload investments, or that we only assumed it for baseload investments or those 3 long lead time investments that you mentioned. So we
Right.
assumed it for combined cycles as well.
Yeah, and that's sort of the main one I'm keen in on. It's combined cycles. Do you have the SACE et al? I think it's like the judicial notice and redirect binder. And if you can't find it, with the chair's permission, I'm happy to approach and find it for you. Oh, thanks. Co-counsel's gonna get it for you.
There's judicial notice documents and there's redirects
Ju-
and judicial notice.
If there is just a judicial notice one, that would be, thanks, appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Can I have you turn to, it should be, if it's just a judicial notice binder, tab 9, it's Senate Bill 266.
Yes.
All right. And so this does appear to be a copy of Session Law 2025-78, otherwise known as Senate Bill 266.
Yes.
Chair Brawley, at this time, I would ask that the commission or the chair take judicial notice of Senate Bill 266.
We will definitely take notice of Senate Bill 266.
Now that you're situated, can I have you turn to page 4 of Senate Bill 266?
Yes.
All right. Do you see that sentence at the bottom of the page? And it starts with respect to natural gas baseload electric generating facilities, the authorization to recover financing costs pursuant to the subdivision shall sunset as of December 31st, 2033 for all construction costs incurred after December 31st, 2033. See that?
Yes.
All right. No further questions.
Thank you, sir. At this point, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Come to order. Okay, public staff.
Thank you, Chair Brawley. Ms. Bateman, good to see you. Mr. Beveridge, welcome to the party.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I'm going to begin by focusing some questions, and feel free, both of you determine who's the best or both of you answer. But I'm going to start focusing some questions on the large load benefits section of your testimony, which I have beginning around page 4. Let me know when you're there.
Yes.
All right. Would you agree with me that sort of for any analysis to be as accurate as possible, the analysis should include the most accurate inputs or inputs that reflect reality as best as possible?
Yes. Yeah, I think to the extent possible, you want to use inputs and assumptions that best reflect what you know at the time to make the accurate or the forecast as accurate as possible. I mean, we know that assumptions will change over time, but that's a good place to start.
All right. I agree. On page 5 of my copy, lines, oh boy, I just lost my place. I think around 12 to 15. I'm gonna read this. You can follow along. The large load impact analysis shows that under current rate structures and policies, not only do large load customers cover their fixed costs, but they also contribute 3.6 billion in revenue to other customers over a 15-year period. Did I have that correct?
You did.
Okay. And this statement, I flagged this statement because it was a little interesting to me. This statement is written in the present tense, but your analysis is actually meant to show a future potential scenario. Is that correct?
That's true. Yes.
Okay.
I think written in the present sense, just in the terms of the analysis that we did and what the analysis is showing. But you're right, it could be written in the future tense and be accurate as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Because yeah, when I read not only do large load customers cover their fixed costs, that made it sound to me like these large load customers are currently covering their fixed costs. But kind of in comparison to the testimony that Ms. Bowman gave, that data center load, for example, is only currently around 1% of current system load, and we're expecting sort of the wave of load to still come in the future. That's why, it seemed like we're talking about a future scenario. Would you agree with that?
Yes, most of these large loads are not on the system yet. So to that sense, it is a future scenario. I think, again, this is sort of referring to the analysis that we're doing now and the, what we talked about as current rate structures and policies, that our current policies, would yield this outcome.
All right, thank you. If you go to page 7 of your testimony, and this is lines 6 through 17, you are generally talking about sort of assumptions that you included for network upgrades, both for the generating plant as well as for upgrades required for customers. Is that a fair sort of synopsis of this section?
This section primarily deals with the revenue requirements for the generation. And then the last sentence does speak to the network upgrades, yes, for large loads to integrate the CC and CT capacity as well as large load additions.
And so I guess I was more focused in when you said interconnection facilities for both the new generation and for the customers. I wanted to kind of break my own rule and ask you an open-ended question as opposed to a question I already know the answer to. I was curious what assumptions as far as transmission and interconnection facility upgrades for the customers does your analysis, what specific sort of upgrades does your analysis intend to capture?
Yeah, so I would say there's two sort of categories of transmission upgrades associated with integrating these large loads. It would be the non-network interconnection facilities and then the network system upgrades. And the analysis captures both. I'll stop there.
Okay. Does that analysis cover facilities like tap lines, additional facilities that a customer may need, transformers, all those are captured in your analysis?
It does. I would say it covers standard service. So to the extent that a customer might request extra facilities, some type of redundancy, something like that would be covered by extra facilities charges and would be incremental to the revenue shown here. But it does include the full transmission upgrade cost for standard service to these customers.
Okay, and that's based on sort of historic customer interconnection costs as opposed to sort of what we might expect for these future, hyperscaler type customers?
No, it's specifically based on project costs for these hyperscale customers. It was based on a set of the large load customers that are in this report, as well as other large loads where we've done analysis to determine what the transmission upgrade cost would be. But it is specific to large loads and recent project costs, both actual costs and estimates.
And in terms of how, actually, I'm gonna just move on to my next question. Your analysis did not capture sales based on the tariff that the majority of these large load customers you analyzed are planning on using. Is that correct?
This is a good area to explain and clarify. I'll take this in sort of two parts in terms of the rate schedules that these large load customers will be served by, and then how that ties into my analysis. So most of our large load ESAs show a large business time of use rate schedule, like our OPTV or LGS-TOU rate schedule. And that's because that's what these customers will be served on during their load ramp period. As they bring on new equipment and do testing, their load is a little bit variable and moves up and down. And so their kind of lowest cost rate is going to be that large business time of use rate. Once they do get up to a full ramp and stabilize, we fully expect them to move to the high load factor rate. That'll be the lowest cost rate for them. But since they're starting on a TOU rate, that's what's reflected in their ESA. But for this analysis, we're actually not assuming any rate schedule that the customer is being served on. What we're doing is we're estimating the amount of revenue towards fixed cost investments that would come from a rate schedule. And so for our schedule HLF, those fixed costs contribution come from our demand charge. That demand charge is very close to the unit cost of demand for these large business customers. For a time of use rate schedule like OPTV or LGS-TOU, those fixed costs are going to come through a combination of demand charges and energy charges. And so for just simplicity and clarity of including that estimate here, we're using that HLF demand charge as a proxy, as a concise way to calculate the fixed costs. But a large load on HLF or on LGS-TOU would provide a similar amount of revenue for fixed costs.
Okay, thanks for that. I think I read in your analysis that it assumes that these projects achieve 95% of their maximum possible contract demand. Did I have that right?
You did.
And I think your testimony described that this was somewhat conservative.
No. So my testimony does not describe that assumption as conservative. It describes the overall analysis as conservative to the extent that additional benefits would accrue beyond the initial 15-year contract term.
Thanks for that clarification. Well, my question is, why would you use a 15% or 95% assumption for the contract demand when the expected capacity factor of, let's say, a data center is actually lower than 95%, say in the range of 85 to 90%?
So my understanding is our expected capacity factor for these customers is around 95%. I have analyzed our data centers that are on the system today, and they range from low 90s to 98% capacity factor. And so that 95% is a reflection of what data centers on our system are doing today and what we'd expect going forward. Yes.
But I guess if I said that another way, you analyzed 25 ESAs and you're assuming that of all of those 25 ESAs, each one of them is expected to achieve nearly their full contracted capacity demand. And your analysis doesn't reflect that the actual results may vary.
And I just want to clarify, because you asked about capacity factor versus percent of their contract demand that they achieve. I think those are two different things. So
Okay.
maybe you could just clarify.
Sure, that's fair. So of the 25 ESAs that you include in your analysis, you're assuming that all 25 of those customers are going to achieve 95% of their maximum possible contract demand, rather than some sort of alternative that allows for variation in what actually might happen. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so appreciate that clarification. So while we would expect data centers to be in the range of a 95% capacity factor, what this analysis is really focusing on is that contract demand and demand charges. And so that 95% doesn't necessarily mean a 95% load factor. You could have an industrial customer that reaches 95% of their contract demand, but might be operating at a 75% load factor. And so it doesn't necessarily assume a 95% load factor. But I will say, this analysis was intended to, provide a foundation that large load customers served on our system, that reach their load, provide, cover their costs and provide benefits to all customers. And so this is really, in particular, this 95% sort of base case. We did run another sensitivity, but this case is really showing the benefits from these customers that, show up and are served on our system. And I guess one other piece I would note here is that this is a high-level analysis. It's looking at specific customers, again, trying to be as accurate as possible based on what we knew at the time. But to the extent that some of these customers may not reach their full ESA, well, then we wouldn't need to include their full ESA demand when we're planning for a future generation in our load forecast. We would start to pull in their actual demands. And so to the extent that there may be some shortfall in a customer realizing their full demand, we would be able to adjust for that and account for that. And so it wouldn't necessarily mean less net benefits on sort of a per megawatt basis.
And your analysis is based on a 2024 cost of service study. Is that correct?
No, in general, this analysis, I'll clarify. This analysis generally doesn't rely on a cost of service study at all. It does use our current HLF demand rates, which are based on a rate case, which utilize the cost of service study. But that's really the extent to which cost of service is playing into this analysis.
Ms. Bateman, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. I don't have an exact page and line reference for you, but just in general, I think your analysis indicates that it does not attempt to address regulatory lag, that you don't attempt to sort of account for the regulatory lag that occurs naturally in the regulated utility process. Is that right?
That would be true of the bill impacts analysis, and that would be true of all of the bill impacts that we do in the IRP scenarios and portfolios. We assume perfect rate making, which means that as your costs are incurred, you assume that you're receiving revenue to recover them, and that's how we develop the bill impacts.
Okay, but so
in
for
the IRP.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Thank you for that. Mr. Beveridge, then, so your large load analysis does attempt to account for regulatory lag?
It does not. I would say this type of analysis, I don't know if regulatory lag is really the right term because we're not looking at rates in particular and how rates change over time. But to the extent that the revenues and costs that we're comparing, the costs are coming in at the time that they are built. So, in a generation plant built in 2031, we're starting to compare revenues to those costs. In reality, those may not be put into rate base for another year or two. And so there could be a lag there that's not reflected. So again, I would say that's kind of an example of conservatism here, that as soon as these transmission and generation assets are built, we're showing them and comparing those costs to the revenues, whereas there would be some lag before those actually got put into base rates.
Okay. And that lag could occur in things such as QIP, as we've discussed, as well as in sort of when projects come in service in an MYRP versus when a large load customer's sales are captured in a test year. Sort of that alignment or misalignment of those factors that could occur over multiple MYRPs is an important analysis that's not reflected in your large load customer analysis here. Is that fair?
I think it's right that what you're describing is just not directly pertinent to the type of analysis that this is.
Well, isn't it relevant to consider, you attempt to quantify the benefits that large load customers will bring to the system, but isn't it important also to consider the costs that ratepayers will pay until those large load customers come online and start actually taking service and paying into the North Carolina system?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different, there's not one analysis that's going to answer all the questions around large loads. I think there's lots of different ways to approach this. The large load impact analysis that I performed, and then the bill impact analysis are two ways to look at it. I would say the large load impact analysis is really kind of zooming out and looking at total revenues that these customers would contribute compared to those incremental revenue requirements. So again, sort of a marginal or incremental type view, but it doesn't necessarily speak to the exact timing of those benefits, because again, those will play into rate cases, when investments are put into rate base, how rates change over time, and things like 1U convergence and other things that the specific timing of that is not captured in this analysis. I think Witness-Bateman's analysis starts to get closer to that, looking more at the timing and a full portfolio of investments. But then the really specific kind of detail you're talking about, which again is also important, I think needs to be looked at on a shorter time frame, and it's the type of thing that we, evaluate and debate and litigate through a rate case.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with that, we're looking at long-term analyses, and we're both showing cumulative benefits in every year of our analysis. But when exactly those benefits are realized by customers, it is a rate-making issue. And whether or not they're being used to offset other cost increases or resulting in reductions to bills or bills that are less than they otherwise would be, is a rate-making topic that generally would be litigated in a rate case
Fair
or a
enough.
rider proceeding.
But it is important for us to consider kind of when those costs come on the system and who's paying for those costs until other, cost causers arrive and start paying for their costs.
I think both of our analyses capture that, though. So Mr. Beveridge's analysis shows the costs coming in when the costs come in, including QIP recovery on those investments. So the costs are coming in when those costs are incurred. So the earliest they could be reflected in customer rates. And the revenues are coming in when those revenues are expected to come in. And so I don't think we're showing costs kind of later than customers would otherwise pay for them.
Yeah, I think my question was more to distinguish between the types of customers that are paying the costs as opposed to all customers paying all costs when they come onto the system. And I think wouldn't you agree with me? It's an important distinction to customers currently on the system paying costs for future customers until they get here. I think those customers would want to know kind of how that bears out. That's important.
Yes, and I think his analysis shows that we show the full incremental costs that these customers are driving, as Mr. Beveridge explained in his analysis. So existing customers, would not pay those costs until they come into his analysis. And then the revenues in his analysis would offset those costs.
Okay. Let's actually. I wanted to pick up on something that I heard in a discussion that you all had in response to Mr. Magariro's questions, that fuel costs aren't included in your analysis. Would you agree with me that Duke has pushed back coal retirements and included rate case adjustments to capture these costs as a result of its initial forecast and has not reevaluated coal life against the high load? Is that fair?
I think that's probably a question for the modeling panel.
Well, and we can ask it to them, but to the extent that you're able to answer, can you answer that question?
Can you rephrase it?
Okay, yeah, I guess at a basic level that if coal retirements are pushed back and gas, the utilization of gas increases, doesn't that have an effect on fuel costs?
Yes, and so I would say the bill impact analysis that I performed includes fuel costs. It includes from the modeling panel, whatever their assumptions were about coal retirement dates and fuel costs and how the system was run. Those are reflected in the bill impact analysis. Mr. Beveridge's analysis was more focused on the fixed costs, non-fuel costs.
Ms. Bateman, in your analysis of the bill impacts based on Duke's rebuttal filing, it appears that analysis utilized Duke's base portfolio, which shows delays in the online date of several gas units, and not the NTAP or the high load provided in the initial filing, nor the rebuttal update. Can you explain why Duke would use a portfolio that shows a misalignment with its requested NTAP in that analysis?
So again, I'm going to defer you to the modeling panel. What I did is take the sensitivity for high load that they included in the initial IRP filing. And that sensitivity was, along with all of the sensitivities, done off the base portfolio. And so I compared those bill impacts, the base portfolio to the high load sensitivity that was done off of that portfolio. And then I also compared it to the recommended portfolio as well. But in terms of why certain sensitivities used certain assumptions, I think that would be more appropriate for the modeling panel.
Yeah, fair. And I'm not asking that. I guess then you'd agree with me that if there's changes in the portfolio that the impact on bills wouldn't be reflected in your analysis, in your rebuttal testimony. Is that fair?
I would say the bill impacts in my rebuttal testimony reflect the sensitivities in the portfolios that were filed in the initial IRP.
Correct. And they don't capture any changes that may be needed as a result of the high load. Is that fair?
So no, because it is a high load sensitivity. So it does capture the increase based on that initial filing, that sensitivity that was included in the initial filing. There was a sensitivity for high load. And so that sensitivity included increased costs because you have to build more generation. So it includes increased costs, increased revenue requirements. It also includes increased load. And then when you divide the two, the increased cost by the increased load, what you end up with is a lower rate than under the base portfolio or the recommended portfolio.
All right, no further questions, Chairman. Thank you both.
Thank you, Mr. Spelling. Does Duke have redirect?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Very briefly. Wanted to just revisit a couple of topics that you all discussed with various counsel during the cross-examination. I'm going to start with the questions from counsel for SACE related to nuclear. Recognizing that Ms. Bateman, neither you nor Mr. Beveridge are the IRP NTAP experts, is it your understanding that nuclear generation has been and is expected to be part of our future resource plan regardless of large load customers or not.
Yes.
And as you think about the rate impacts and the fixed costs associated with large investments required for nuclear generation, will the customers in totality benefit from having more users on the system when those investments are made?
Yes, absolutely. And when I talked about just now how to get the rate, you divide the total cost by the total megawatt hours to get that per megawatt hour rate or per kilowatt hour rate. If you're investing in a significant large generation investment like nuclear, that's going to provide benefits over decades, many decades to the customer base. It's a benefit to customers to be able to spread those investment costs over more kilowatt hours.
Okay. So if one assumes that nuclear is going to be part of the resource plan long term, you think it's going to be a good thing for all customers to have more users on the system?
Yes.
All right. Now, both of you were asked a series of questions about the two studies that were presented in your testimony. You recall those questions from Council for Public Staff and Council for SACE?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if we could just step back, big picture, the first of those two studies was your study, correct, Mr. Beveridge?
Yes.
And can you just summarize one more time, what was the big picture intent of your study and what did it show?
Yeah, so the large load impact analysis is focusing on the incremental cost to serve these large customers of building out our system through generation transmission investment and looking at the revenues that we would see from these customers through our standard pricing and policies in place today. And what it shows is that these customers cover their fixed costs through the entire 15-year term that we looked at and contribute significant revenue beyond that, $3.6 billion over the 15 years for this about 4.5 gigawatts of large loads. And the net benefits are positive in every year of that, meaning that the total revenues, cumulative revenues, exceed the cumulative costs throughout that entire 15-year window. And so it's kind of getting at the heart of the question of, there are different narratives around the country of how large loads are going to play out and the rate impacts they're going to have. And I think that's fair because it will likely play out differently in different states and different utilities. But here in our utility, with our rates, this is intended to establish sort of the basic fact that large load on our system provides benefits to all customers beyond covering their own costs.
And on the cost side of the equation in your study, can you just reaffirm big picture the categories of costs that you were looking at in your study? What were those categories of costs?
Generation investments for both base load as well as reserve margin, and the network upgrades associated with bringing that generation on, as well as the interconnection and network upgrades for bringing on large loads.
And you were asked questions from Council for SACE regarding why did your study consider the incremental costs of new generation versus the costs of generation currently on the system? Why did you choose to focus on the cost of new generation that will be added to the system?
I think a key question around these large loads is building out our system going to cost more than the average cost of our system today? We see cost increases in combined cycles. And so is building those investments going to raise rates because they could potentially be more expensive than our sort of average cost today? And that's why we're looking at the incremental piece to basically show that even given where we are today, building out our system with new generation, new transmission is still providing benefits to all customers.
Thank you, Ms. Beveridge. Turning to you, Ms. Bateman, if you could do the same, just briefly summarize the intent of your study, what it considered, and what it showed.
Yeah. And so I don't even know that I would call it a study. We do bill impacts on various portfolios in the IRPs, and we did certain bill impacts for the initial filing on certain portfolios and sensitivities. And then in rebuttal testimony, we did bill impacts on the large load sensitivity, given the increases that we had seen in the projected load forecast. So we did bill impacts using the same methodologies that we use for all of the other bill impact IRP calculations. And what we saw is that the effect of the large load sensitivity was lower rates for customers. And so my analysis is where Mr. Beveridge looked at incremental costs. Are they driving more incremental costs than they're paying for? Mine looked at kind of the system average rate making that we do. We add all of the costs together in the system and then allocate them out to customers. Using that analysis, are these customers creating a benefit for other customers? And what we saw is that the rates were lower under the large load sensitivity.
And just to confirm, your analysis took into account fixed and variable costs, including fuel costs.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Brawley. We have no further questions this time.
Okay, we'll go to commissioner questions. Good morning.
Good morning.
On page 6 of your testimony, you provide more details on the large load impact analysis you conducted. Why did you assume that the 25 individual ESAs would only achieve 95% of the contract demand?
Our contract demand is typically set as a maximum that we're building our infrastructure and system to support. And so, we avoid a customer ever exceeding contract demand. We would want to know that ahead of time and move the contract demand up to, reflect that our facilities and our grid can support that. And so assuming 100% contract demand is just not realistic. It's not really the intent of how we define the term contract demand. But 95% is sort of a reasonable expectation for these customers that do come on.
Of the 25 ESAs you include comprise 4,800 megawatts of contract demand. How did you arrive at 4,300 megawatts of applicable planning demand used in your analysis?
Yes, there were two factors there that brought that from around 4,800 to around 4,300. The first is that we looked at contract demand that came on after 2025. So some of these ESAs are actually, revisions or expansions of data centers that have been on our system for a while. And so if, 100 megawatts had been served on our system for the past 10 years, we didn't want to include that in the analysis here. And so part of that is demand that was already on our system before 2025. And then the other small part is that 95% kind of planning margin. So it's basically a 5% decrement from the contract demand to what we'd actually, build to support from a generation standpoint.
Well, okay, I think I'm getting there. 95% of 4,800 is actually 4,560. And then you've given me another 100. That puts us at 4,460. So we're still.
Yes.
Where's the other 160?
So we're starting with. I don't know how specific we want to get with the numbers.
Well, I'll tell you what. All right.
At
this
what
point,
I can say is the 4,800 comes down to approximately 4,500 when you remove the load that's already on the system before 2025, and then the 4,500 becomes 43 when you apply the 95%. Using slightly round numbers.
Yeah, well, 4275. All right. Well, I think we beat that horse enough. And why did you discount ESAs in the large load impact analysis when Duke did not discount ESAs in any load forecast scenario?
I would say in part in this large load impact analysis, we were looking at revenues. And so we were looking at what these customers would actually achieve in terms of their load, and what they would be paying in terms of demand charges and fixed cost contribution, which will be a little bit less than what we need to build our system to support as sort of a maximum contract demand. So it's really that difference between a contract demand and then what we'd expect from revenue from the sort of average maximum demand that these customers realize.
Thank you. Questions from other commissioners?
One.
Commissioner McKissick?
And this is just one simple question. And I've listened to your testimony about how all of the projections were made and how you computed what the benefit would be. Is there any information that you are missing or lacking that would allow you to perhaps make projections of a greater degree of a precision or accuracy above and beyond what you have here today?
So the word dynamic's been used a lot, in this proceeding. Certainly, things are going to change, assumptions are going to change, load ramps are going to shift a little bit. And so I don't know if accuracy for a 15-year forecast is really, possible. I would say that, we've done some sensitivities around this, and the result, which is that these customers cover their costs and provide benefits to other customers, is true over a range of sensitivities. And a range of customers showing up and timing and things like that. And so I think that's the key part of this is, or really the intent behind it is establishing that kind of basic fact that these customers are providing benefit for all other customers.
I understand that foundational precept that you're working from. And I guess in my mind, the only thing that might change your projections would be if you looked at what occurs over the next 2 or 3 years and find that things are occurring in a way other than the way it was originally projected or anticipated. But that would take an historical perspective to determine.
Yes, we are. I think we've gained a lot of experience in the past 2-3 years, some of which Witness State spoke to about these large loads and how they come on the system and how they work through the queue and things like that. We'll certainly learn a lot more in the next 5 years. So as we gain that experience, we'll refine the load forecast. You could certainly, refine this as well over time.
Sure. Thank you.
Commissioner Tucker? Commissioner Guida?
Thank you, Chair. So to state the obvious, there's intense speculation on data center impacts to residential customer rates, and this is all what we're talking about here. This commission, of course, has heard testimonies at public witness hearings about this. When we're thinking about your large load impact analysis, which indicates this dynamic of downward pressure on rates for residential customers, would it be accurate to state that this, for lack of a better term, dynamic is highly related to the nature of low load factors of residential customers alongside the bulk of those customers being served on volumetric energy-only rates?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of that question?
Yeah, I'm just kind of asking about kind of the basis that kind of what one would expect would come out of an analysis like this. And my question would be is kind of 2 factors maybe, and feel free to, say, one of these doesn't count, or both. But I guess my question is, does this come out of the nature of the fact that residential customers have typically low load factors, and or the fact that those customers are served primarily on volumetric energy only rates?
Yeah, I don't think either of those are contributing to the results that we're seeing.
Okay.
And I think Mr. Beveridge is just showing at a system level, excuse me, that it lowers the overall system cost per megawatt hour.
Yeah, I'd agree that, what rate schedule or the fact that they pay volumetric rates, that really doesn't play into this. But you also mentioned that residential customers are lower load factor. I think a piece of that plays in here, in that if you look at a cost of service study and you look at just your basic, total dollars to serve a class divided by kilowatt hours, large industrial customers usually have about half of the cost than a residential customer would on just a cents per kilowatt hour basis of what it costs to serve those customers. And it's because the residential customers are smaller, lower load factor, spread out, coincident with the peak. There's lots of reasons that contribute to it. But so as you think about that, if you bring on large loads that are high load factor, very efficient, the dollars to serve these customers are very large, but on a dollar per kW, it's actually very small. If you were to interconnect a gigawatt of residential customers, the cost would be huge, significantly more than what we're talking about here. And so it really shouldn't be a surprise that adding very efficient load to the system brings down the overall cost of the system.
Right. And I think you mentioned a second ago that low load factors for residential customers kind of bear into this. I think I just heard you say that, but
The low load factor contributes to the fact that residential customers on a per unit basis cost more than a data center would cost to serve.
right, exactly. Okay, thank you. So a follow-up on that. So as you think about this industry represented by many in this room, who, in your opinion, holds the primary responsibility for educating customers about this dynamic, specifically that they pay a significant portion of infrastructure within their energy rates, than do other customer classes? And I'll just say that this question, of course, is predicated on the assumption that we all agree that customers should be so educated.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know how much I could speak to that. I would certainly think the utility, is part of that, of communicating with our customers, helping them understand this. I would say part of the reason that this analysis was done is exactly for that reason, to help certainly the commission, but customers understand the dynamics at play here. I mentioned before that this will play out differently in different states and different utilities. There are different dynamics that could lead you to a different result. But here we're seeing these net benefits, and in terms of who needs to communicate that message, I think we as a utility have some responsibility there. But I don't know what else you would add.
Yeah, I would agree. We, as the utility, have responsibility to educate our customers, and we're attempting to do that through partially through this testimony, to educate the commission and other parties. But I would think parties that are potentially being criticized in the public as allegedly raising customer rates would also have an incentive to provide that education as well.
Okay, my last follow-up on this is just can you describe any types of customer education campaigns that the companies have engaged in to help customers understand the elements of this dynamic, or any campaigns that are planned?
So I'm not familiar with that, and I'm not even sure who the right panel would be. Potentially Witness Bowman from an overall policy perspective.
Okay, I'll circle back on that. Thank you.
All right. Questions on commissioner questions? Mr. Magarira, I think you are the only one.
Just a couple. So this is do y'all recall the line of questioning from Chair Brawley, really kind of drilling down on how the companies got from the 4,800 megawatts of ESA demand that was analyzed in the large load impacts analysis down to the 4,300 megawatt number? Do y'all recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
I might have misheard or just sort of wrote this down incorrectly, but I think I have written down that obviously if you do the 95%, that gets you to, I think it's like 4,560. And then there's obviously an additional 260 megawatts. And I think I heard you say that the 260 was due to existing existing large load being taken out from that figure. Is that correct?
Using round numbers, I don't know that it's necessarily 260, but 200 to 300 megawatts, somewhere in there, would be associated with these 25 ESAs, but contract demand that had been brought on before 2025.
So just so I can sort of conceptualize this, because I'm, lawyer, not a engineer or sort of like professional like y'all. Is this a situation where you've got an existing project that is part of this analysis, but they're scaling up their operations? Like, so that's sort of the existing demand that's being excised, or what's actually going on here when you say existing that's
Yeah.
being taken out?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Not to, just a complete hypothetical would be if 10 years ago we had a 50 megawatt data center come onto the system, and then they're going to, add another 100 megawatts in 2028. We would have shown the incremental 100 and not the full 150 that the ESA reflects, because we're looking at, an incremental portion.
Okay, got it. That's helpful. I had one or two other ones. Actually, I think that's it, actually. No further questions.
Duke, do you have anything based?
Very briefly, if there's no other cross questions, yes.
Okay, so
Thank you. Just very briefly, you had a series of questions from Commissioner McKissick about what is it that we were missing in the study, or what are we potentially missing, and what would you, if you had it, we improve this study? I think I heard you say perfect foresight. It'd be great to have a crystal ball, right, to do this kind of analysis. And do you have a crystal ball?
We don't. No.
Okay. And is it the case that your study makes a sort of set of assumptions about the future, correct?
Yes.
And you've, to the best of your ability, made those assumptions reasonably based on what we know today, correct?
Yes, we chose inputs and assumptions to align with CPIRP modeling as much as possible, and to reflect what we've learned from large loads and kind of what we know today. Yeah.
And while you're not the expert on these issues, you've heard the testimony of Mr. Tate regarding the contractual provisions. And in what ways do those contractual provisions also give you confidence that your analysis is reasonable and provides a good, an accurate view what we know today about what the future may hold?
Yeah, I think witness Tate explained this probably better than I can, but in hold, we have a queue process and ESA provisions, including minimum billing demands and termination damages, and refundable advance for interconnection facilities. All these things that I think encourage customers to not be speculative, to be very serious and accurate about what their load ramp is going to be, because they're kind of on the hook financially if they're wrong. And so I think that has improved the confidence we have in the ESAs coming on and the load ramps they provide.
And you've also, I believe, heard Mr. Tate describe the pipeline of additional projects who are seeking service in the Carolinas. As you think about the potential that any one of the projects in your study may not come to fruition, does the fact that there's a pipeline of projects waiting to receive service give you confidence that over time, over a long period of time, there will be sufficient customers using the system to provide the benefits that you've shown in your study?
It does, yeah. The analysis used around 4.5 gigawatts of load that was at the spring 2026 report. Obviously, we have some ESAs, even signed since then, but I mentioned that our analysis can scale, up and down within a reasonable range, and the conclusions hold true. And to the extent, you think about potential cancellations, or if one project left the system. I mean, what we've seen is that speed to power is one of the most important, aspects for these customers. And so if you have a site that is developed, interconnected, sort of ready to serve from the grid, that's extremely attractive to prospective customers. And we're certainly seeing the demand that would kind of fill that gap if that was to show up. Basically, there's plenty of customers ready to take someone else's spot in line if we did see that.
And just last question, given the testimony that you provided that shows a $3.6 billion benefit to customers, given the testimony you've heard today about how these large load customers will help to offset significant generation investments like nuclear that may be needed in the future, would you agree it's fair to characterize this growth for the state as an opportunity for the state to benefit the state as a whole and benefit all customers?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. You're both excused.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Neal, I think you have a motion or a request.
Thank you, Chair Brawley. Yes, David Neal for SACE et al. It's come to our understanding that no parties have crossed for Michael Goggin. SACE et al. Witnessed Michael Goggin, and that those who had indicated a reserve time have indicated they would waive cross. So at this time, we would ask if he may be excused from the proceeding and his direct testimony be entered into the record at the appropriate time.
All right, we'll go ahead and excuse him, and I've already added you to the list of all of the people who are going to be entering testimony when we start on Monday morning.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, so without objection, SACE witness Goggin is excused. The next panel for us will be Public Staff Grid Edge Panel, unless there are other issues that we need to address first.
Chair Brawley,
Yes.
Director here. One very preliminary, just to put parties on notice. We appreciate that we've sped up a little bit here today, and that's a good thing. Wanted to note for parties that in the event we complete this panel here shortly, the panel that we do have available who's here in Raleigh is our transmission panel. So I just wanted to put folks on notice that if we get through this panel in a timely manner, the next panel that would be available for Duke Energy is the transmission panel.
Thank you for that update. I've just realized with the time, I had promised a 20-minute break for nutrition for one of the support people today. This might be a good time to take that, and then we'll start back up. But I'll tell you what, before we do, Dr. Weaver, you're already affirmed. Mr. Williamson, do you wish to affirm or to swear?
To be sworn, please.
If you'll put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the truth, that testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do swear.
All right, sir. Mr. Jirac, let's go ahead and enter their testimony before we take a break.
Thank you, Chairman Brawley. This is,
Excuse me.
that's all right.
Yeah, I'm in such a hurry to get us out of here.
Fair enough. I'll try to be quick.
Uh,
Ann Keyworth for the public staff. Mr. Williamson, would you please state your name, business address, and current position for the record?
Yes, I'm Tommy Williamson Jr. I'm an engineer with the Public Staff Utilities Division. Work at 430 North Salisbury Street, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Dr. Weaver, could you do the same?
Yes, my name is Leah Weaver. I work at 430 North Salisbury Street in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm an engineer with the Research Economics and Modeling section of the Energy Division of the Public Staff.
Mr. Williamson and Dr. Weaver, on March 30th, 2026, did you both prepare and cause to be pre-filed direct joint testimony in this docket consisting of 28 pages, 2 appendices, and 2 exhibits?
Yes.
Yes.
Did your testimony contain confidential information?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you have any corrections to your pre-filed direct joint testimony?
No, we do not.
No.
If I were to ask you the same questions today while testifying from the witness stand, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Yes.
And lastly, did you both prepare and cause to be pre-filed on June 9th, 2026, a summary of your joint testimony in docket number E-100 sub 207A?
Yes.
Yes.
Chairman Brawley, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct joint testimony of Mr. Williamson and Dr. Weaver, consisting of 28 pages, 2 appendices, and 2 exhibits, and the pre-filed summary of the joint testimony of Mr. Williamson and Dr. Weaver be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Okay, the direct testimony of Dr. Laura Weaver and Tommy Williamson Jr., 28 pages, 2 appendices, 2 exhibits, including confidential information as filed March 30, 2026, and a witness summary as filed on June 9th, 2026, will be identified and without objection admitted to the record as if given orally from the stand today. So at this point, let's take a recess until 12:15, and then we will begin cross-examination. We are adjourned or in recess. Let's come to order and return to the record. So this will be cross-examination of the grid edge panel for the public staff. Yeah, I've got so many of these things I'm trying to figure. Okay, I got them. Okay, Sigfer.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Dr. Weaver and Mr. Williamson. My name is Peter Ledford. I'm here on behalf of the Carolina Industrial Group Fair Utility Rates. Just to level set, in introducing your panel, you testify that you're addressing grid edge, which on page 4, you explain that Duke defines as, quote, technologies, programs, and investments that advance a decentralized, distributed, and two-way grid, with the edge referring to the edge of the electricity network where Duke's electricity reaches customers' homes and business. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And then starting on page 6, you testify that behind the meter generation in North Carolina has mainly referred to battery storage, to solar and battery storage. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And would you agree that the public staff's proposals in this docket writ large will serve to encourage further adoption of behind the meter diesel and natural gas generation in North Carolina by large load customers?
Whose testimony are you referring to specifically?
So it's my understanding that other public staff witnesses are proposing to make permanent the temporary curtailment provisions of Duke's ESA for large load customers. Is that consistent with your understanding?
That is not consistent with my understanding.
Could you explain your understanding?
Well, this panel did not testify about ESAs or large load curtailment as they pertain to ESAs. And my understanding is that the public staff has not put forward any proposals related to large load curtailment in this docket.
But the public staff didn't model large load curtailment, correct?
We modeled large load curtailment as it is agreed to in ESAs, is my understanding as someone who is not the large load curtailment witness.
And if customers are curtailed, they're going to seek behind the meter generation to have reliable, consistent electric service. Is that accurate?
I'm going to object and say I think that's beyond the scope of their testimony. That's okay. So I just objected saying that I think that's beyond the scope of these witnesses' testimony.
Mr. Ledford, I think you're asking them to make a conclusion that's beyond really the scope of what they know. That is one possible, but there might be others. I think either rephrase your question or.
Well, I'm happy to put it as you put it. Would y'all agree that it is possible that customers would seek natural gas and diesel generation if they were faced with curtailment?
Again, I'm going to say that I think this is it's a hypothetical beyond the scope of their testimony and the nature of their testimony.
I'll respond that the nature of their testimony is all customer programs, and that would include any behind the meter generation.
I think I'm going to sustain the objection at this point, and we understand where you're going. So if you would continue, sir.
Would you all agree that net metering for non-residential customers is capped at 5 megawatts?
So I did not do an extensive review of the existing net metering tariffs in this docket, but subject to check, that's my understanding.
And so from a practical perspective, net metering being capped at 5 megawatts is not a practical solution for large load customers that have loads of much larger than 5 megawatts. Is that fair?
Again, I just want to say I don't think this panel testified to large load at all. It's beyond the scope of what these witnesses in this proceeding are familiar with.
Well, the panel did testify to behind the meter solar and storage, and I think it's fair for them to be asked questions about how that applies to all customer classes.
I think it also pertains more to the general rate case than this proceeding, but defer to you.
I don't understand what it has to do at all with the general rate case.
Would you restate your question, Mr. Ledford?
Does the 5 megawatt cap on net metering mean that net metering is not a practical option for customers whose load is much larger than 5 megawatts?
I think I'm going to sustain the objection, sir.
All right. In front of you is a binder of SIGFR potential exhibits. Mr. Chairman, I would ask that SIGFR potential exhibit 54 be identified as SIGFR public staff grid edge panel cross exhibit 1.
That would sig for potential cross
54.
54. Okay.
And these are SIGFR comments of SIGFR 2 and 3 filed in docket number E-100 sub 179 on July 15th, 2022.
Okay. Sig for cross. Grid edge. Direct. Exhibit 1 as your exhibit 54
Yes, sir.
is identified for the record.
And could y'all flip to page 14 of this exhibit, please?
We're there.
And would you agree that Roman numeral 8 down towards the bottom states that Duke did not analyze how implementation of new non-residential demand response programs previously requested by SIGFR on multiple occasions played into the carbon plan? Spills over onto the next page.
I don't say the last part you said about the carbon plan.
Right, it spills over onto the next page.
Mr. Ledford, how far down? I'm reading number 8 and I don't see where it says anything about the carbon plan.
Would you agree that these are comments in response to the carbon plan that was filed in sub 179?
Yes.
Yes.
And would you agree that it says that Duke did not analyze how implementation of these new demand response programs previously requested by SIGFR?
Yes, the document says that.
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. And to your knowledge, do you know in the current carbon plan, did Duke implement or model any of the proposals recommended by SIGFR previously?
My understanding is that Duke's modeling was focused on existing programs, so I'm not aware of any that were proposed beyond extension of Power Pair, which is the residential program.
Thank you. And could you flip to potential exhibit 57 as well? And Chair Brawley, I would ask that SIGFR potential exhibit 57 be identified as SIGFR grid edge panel cross exhibit 1. I'm sorry.
Exhibit 1 or exhibit 2?
Exhibit 2.
Okay, your 57 is identified as SIG for cross grid edge panel direct exhibit 2.
And to the witnesses, would y'all agree that these are SIGFR's initial comments that were filed on January 26th, 2024 in 3 dockets? E2 sub 931, E7 sub 1032, and E100 sub 179?
Yes.
Yes.
And looking at that first paragraph on the initial page towards the second half, would you agree that these comments are regarding the ongoing review of the DSM and EE cost recovery mechanisms?
Yes, that's what the document states.
Yes.
And could you flip to page 4? And looking at paragraph 10, would you agree that SIGFR discusses here that it has previously presented the Southern California Edison time of use based interruptible program to Duke's comprehensive rate design study?
Yes, it
Yes.
states that.
Yes, that's what it says.
And to the best of your knowledge, did Duke include that in its instant CPIRP?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions. And if appropriate, I would move the introduction of SIGFR's exhibits 1 and 2 into the record.
Okay, so the motion is for Sigma Cross Grid Edge Direct Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 without objection are admitted into evidence.
Thank you, sir.
EDF.
Good afternoon, Ben Smith from Environmental Defense Fund. I think I just have one or two questions with respect to your testimony regarding EV load exclusion from the UEE forecast. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
So your testimony, and I don't necessarily want to focus on one line, but beginning on page 16 of the utility energy efficiency forecast goes through a number of issues and it sort of settles in discussing Duke's decision to remove the EV sales from the determination of the UEE forecast. Can you explain to the commission, the folks here, sort of in plain language, what that means and what your concerns are?
Yes. So the sales, the EV sales were removed by Duke. And what normally is done is the prior year eligible retail sales are calculated, but there's a provision to remove customers who qualify, the opt-out customers. And those are customers that have at least 1 million kilowatt hours usage. So that is the only provision where load is allowed to be removed. And so what we objected to was the removal of EV sales from that calculation. And so that's the plain language, I would say.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
If I could just provide some additional context for clarity and for the record. So this EE forecast that Mr. Williamson is describing, they take a percentage of those eligible sales and then they deduct that from the load forecast. So you're ultimately reducing the load forecast in the modeling.
Thank you. And so is the implication that by removing EV sales from this calculation, it sort of lowers the total amount of load that, and I might be restating what you just said, so I apologize, but I am not an engineer, so I need to spell it out. Is the implication that by removing this, you're just making the total amount of load under this UEE metric lower?
Yes. So basically, if was using my hands as an example, so if we had all eligible retail sales at this level and we remove the EV sales, well, that just drops down the amount of where that floor, that 1% floor would be. So we thought it appropriate that the EV sales be included. I think the argument Duke made was that there was no potential for savings from EV. And the argument was, well, to be consistent with what's being done in the DSMEE rider mechanism is that all load should be included except for what is eligible for the opt-out customers.
And just to make it clear, so we're talking about reducing, by removing the EV sales, you're reducing that energy efficiency estimate. So ultimately, you're increasing the load forecast because the reduction is smaller.
And so while you're not necessarily rejecting the plan or any part of it for this basis going forward, is your recommendation is that Duke should include EV sales in this calculation. Is that right?
That's correct.
No further questions.
Thank you, sir. Microsoft.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williamson, Dr. Weaver. I'm Ben Snowden here on behalf of Microsoft.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Williamson and Dr. Weaver, you all are the public staff's designated experts on Duke's Grid Edge programs. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
It's a basic question. Yeah, all right. But I take it that as those experts, you are familiar with the statutory provisions and commission rules governing DSM programs in North Carolina?
Yes.
Okay. And subject to check, would you agree that North Carolina law defines demand-side management as activities, programs, or initiatives undertaken by an electric power supplier or its customers to shift the timing of electricity use from peak to non-peak demand periods?
Yes, that's what statute says.
All right. And the statute also provides that demand-side management includes, but is not limited to, load management, electric system equipment and operating controls, direct load control, and interruptible load. Is that right?
That is correct.
For purposes of your testimony, you reviewed Duke's Grid Edge, including DSM offerings, how they're incorporated in Duke's models and resource plans, and determined whether in your view that they were reasonable. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And you say, I'm looking at, you say in your testimony that for purposes of this proceeding, the underlying forecast for the DSM contributions proposed by Duke is appropriate and should be accepted. I can point you, it's on page 26, but does that sound like a fair summary?
That is correct.
Thank you. And in your testimony, you're not recommending any changes to Duke's existing DSM offerings.
That's correct.
Okay. Have you reviewed Google witness Isaac Gable-Frank's recommendation that it's appropriate for Duke to develop a large load demand response program to mitigate risks to customers and plan a more efficient and less costly system?
I have not.
Okay, so you have not reviewed Mr. Gable-Frank's recommendation?
I might have, but I would need some more. Yeah.
Okay, understood. Have you reviewed the testimony of Duke's Grid Edge rebuttal panel?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. And would you agree that Duke's Grid Edge rebuttal panel agrees with Mr. Gable-Frank's recommendation?
Would you point us to that page?
Yes, that would be on pages 22 and 23 of Duke's Grid Edge rebuttal testimony.
Okay, I've reviewed it.
Okay, and you would agree that Duke's Grid Edge panel agrees with and accepts Mr. Gable-Frank's recommendation?
Yes, that is what it says.
Okay. Do you have any reason to disagree with this recommendation?
Well, I would say in reading from Duke's rebuttal, starting, let's see, page 23, line 8, it says the companies agree with witness Gable-Frank that it would be beneficial to work with large load customers and other stakeholders to develop a cost-effective demand response offering within the Power Share program for large load customers.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree with that statement. I agree, and that's just to maybe divert a little bit. That is what happens now. We encourage that engagement and that conversations with customers to come up with a cost-effective program. So yes, that would be the process that happens now for any tariff that is approved. So yes, I would support that process.
Thank you. what would be the process at a high level? What would be the process before this commission for developing such a program and getting it approved?
Well, I'd say as far as developing the program, it's Duke's program. So again, those individual conversations with customers to determine what's the benefit, what's an incentive that's appropriate, and ultimately is it cost effective. So any tariff that comes or application that comes before the commission, it has to be determined that it is cost effective for approval. So that's.
All right, thank you. And would you agree that if Duke were to file an application for approval of a new DSM program, it would have to file that in a separate docket?
A separate docket?
Separate sub-docket, yes.
And a sub-docket compared to what? You're saying a different docket from what?
Well, subject to check, would you agree that Commission Rule R868 provides that applications for new DSM programs need to be brought in new sub-dockets under the utilities docket?
Okay, yes.
And those applications have to be supported by, I think, as you mentioned, analysis of the cost and benefits of the proposed program?
Correct.
And that cost benefit analysis includes looking at the impacts of the DSM program on the utilities and its customers as a whole, but also the impacts on customers who participate in the plan.
I'm going to object on the basis that I think this is getting into legal and procedural matters that might be beyond the witness's expertise in his testimony.
There's a pending recommendation for a new DSM program to be developed. These folks are the public staff's designated experts on DSM and EE programs. I'm not going to get into, I think this is my last question in this line of questions, but presumably they're familiar with the process that would entail.
And I would just say that I'm not sure the public staff agrees that this would be considered a DSM program under how the statute is written.
I'm gonna give him a little leeway, but understand if they tell you they can't answer it, you have to accept it.
Yes, sir.
All right. So restate your question.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm going to make sure. Okay, so Mr. Williamson, that required cost benefit analysis would include an analysis of the impacts of a DSM program on the utility and its customers as a whole, but also the impacts on customers who participate in the plan.
And what I would say is the application process and what is required in the rules that need to be provided in the application process, I would say we'll stick to that. And that application, supports the appropriate cost benefit analysis.
Okay.
And I'm saying I'm not deviating from what the rules say need to be provided.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. To your knowledge, though, no large load DSM program yet exists, and no analysis of the cost and benefits of such a program has been prepared. Is that right?
Would you, just for the sake of this, what do you define as large load?
Well, in Mr. Gable Frank's testimony and in the Duke rebuttal testimony, they refer to customers over 100 megawatts.
Okay, fair enough. And would you restate?
Sure. You'd agree that with respect to a large load customer DSM program, that no analysis of the costs and benefits of such a program has been prepared, to your knowledge?
Again, I'm going to object on the basis I'm not sure that I'm not sure that the witness and Mr. Snowden are on the same page about what constitutes a DSM program.
I'm specifically referring to the recommendation in Mr. Gable Frank's testimony, which Duke has accepted or agreed to about a large load DSM program.
And Mr. Williamson has also indicated that he's not familiar with the testimony. I recognize he's reviewed Mr. Duff's testimony, but this might be getting beyond.
I think I'm going to sustain this one.
All right. Okay. I'd like you to please look at Well, on page 25 of your testimony in table 3, you discuss Duke's existing DSM programs.
Okay.
See that? Okay. And those existing programs include the power share large load curtailable tariff. Is that right? And I think here this table splits things between DEC and DEP, but if I understand correctly, this last row in the table should probably read power share large load curtailable tariff for both DEP and DEC. Is that right? Am I misunderstanding that?
Well, DEP has a large load curtailable.
Okay.
So that's separate from what was in DEC as power share.
Okay. Are those two programs similar?
Well, they address, hang on just a minute. So the DEP large load curtailable, for customers with at least 1,000 kW subject to curtailment.
Okay.
And power share for customers with at least 100 kW. So there's a difference in eligibility.
Okay, understood. Well, let's talk about the power share non-residential load curtailment tariff, and that's rider PS for Duke Energy Carolinas. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and at a high level, this program offers financial incentives to non-residential customers to curtail their energy usage at Duke's request.
That's correct.
And it offers several options that participating customers can choose from.
Yes, it is.
And one of those options is the mandatory 50 curtailment program. Is that right?
That is one of the options.
Okay. Under that mandatory 50 curtailment program, the customer agrees to reduce and maintain its load at the level specified in the customer's program contract for up to 50 hours a year during periods when DEP experiences capacity constraints. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and that option is activated during emergency conditions, correct?
I think you said earlier it's operated at the need of the company. So if they consider it an emergency, yes.
Thank you. Although there are a few important differences, but you would agree that at a high level, this mandatory 50 program is pretty similar to the curtailment provisions that are present in some of Duke's large load ESAs.
We do not look at any curtailment provisions at all in any of the ESAs. So I'm not familiar with any ESA provisions.
So as the public staff designated grid edge experts, you were not asked to review the curtailment provisions or the modeling of the curtailment provisions in those ESAs?
Well, our review was confined to programs, DSM and EE programs that had gone through the approval process and were active tariffs for participation, voluntary participation by customers.
Okay, so you're not familiar with those ESA provisions?
No, I'm not.
Okay. And you were not asked to review them at all?
Mr. Snowden, I believe witness Thomas and witness Michna discussed this issue in their testimony.
Yes, I understand that. Then they deferred questions about DSM to you all. So,
well, I would say, yeah, for tariffed.
Understood.
Programs that are tariffed.
Okay. All right. Could you all please turn to page 26 of your testimony?
We're there.
And you see figure 5 there, maximum annual DSM potential?
Yes.
Okay, and this figure shows total DSM potential in DEC and DEP over the planning period as modeled by Duke.
Yes, it does.
Okay, and there are separate rows for summer and winter, and there are separate lines for summer and winter and separate lines for DEC and DEP, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Subject to check and understanding that these are just lines and there aren't really full numbers here. As I look at this figure, it seems to me that in summer, starting in 2026, the summer total DSM potential between DEP and DEC is about 1,600 megawatts in 2026, and it ramps up to about 2,100 megawatts in 2049. Does that look about right? Subject to check.
Yeah, subject to check.
Okay, and it looks like the DSM potential for summer in 2035 is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,800 megawatts. Does that seem right to you, based on this chart?
In what year?
In 2035. I know it is a little hard to tell.
Yeah, that's a rough approximation.
Yes, understood. Okay. And in winter, the winter DSM potential is a bit lower. As I look at this, I would estimate it's about 800 megawatts in 2026, ramping up to about 1,800 megawatts in 2049. Does that look about right? Again, I'm
Yeah,
looking at
subject
big
to
round
that.
numbers.
We'll take that as approximation.
Thank you. And it looks like it's about 1,300 megawatts in 2035. Does that seem about right to you?
And that's for winter or summer?
That was winter, I'm sorry.
About 1,600, did you say?
I looks like 1,300 to me, but if you
Okay.
think it's 15, 16.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
fine.
Are y'all familiar with the public staff's load panel testimony regarding curtailable large load?
I'd say familiar. We're not those witnesses. We haven't reviewed it in detail.
Understood. Thank you. Do you recall or are you aware that Mr. Thomas or that panel recommended that Duke should model an enhanced or expanded version of its large load curtailment provisions for purposes of resource planning?
No.
I would need you to point me to it.
Okay. Are you aware that, or would you agree that I can point you to it, but would you all agree that that the public staff panel has recommended that large load curtailment through those ESA provisions should be modeled should be taken as a resource in Duke's modeling of its resource plans?
I'm not sure about the exact phrasing there, but I think the public staff's recommendation was that the large load curtailment program as it, exists and companies have agreed to it should be included in the resource planning modeling.
Just a moment, please. Subject to check, would you agree that Mr. Thomas estimates almost 1,500 megawatts of available large load demand response in 2030 through that curtailment program?
Could you provide a
Yes.
page reference?
Yeah, I sure will. Sorry. That would be page 51 of the public staff's load panel.
Do we have a copy of our testimony up here? I don't have Mr. Thomas's testimony printed.
And I'm curious where this is going, just because I'm not sure if it'll be in the scope of this panel's testimony.
Well, I'm about to compare the DSM potential that this panel has included in their testimony with the potential megawatts of large load curtailment that Mr. Thomas includes in his. And so the only way I can compare the testimony of those two panels is to ask one of the panels.
Mr. Snowden, the Duke testimony that you're referring to, is that a rebuttal or
Sorry, Chair Brawley, that is the public staff's load panel. I'm sorry if I was unclear about that. That's the testimony of Mr. Fay and Mr. Thomas.
I'm not sure that the witnesses have a copy of that in front of them.
Yeah.
I don't have one to provide myself.
Okay. You all don't have copies of the.
I'm trying to pull it up.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'm happy to wait, but we do this subject to check.
One moment.
Okay.
What page is that on?
That is on page 51. There's a figure there.
Yeah, go.
Chair Brawley, may I approach the system?
All right. Yes.
Mr. Felling, if helpful, we have a binder.
Yep.
we got
Commissioner
some of
McKissick
that.
is having to step out for about 2 minutes without objection.
Objection. Would you like me to wait for a couple minutes?
Actually, if you would,
Absolutely.
let's do
Happy
that.
to do that.
We definitely want this to be completely buttoned down. Yeah, we'll just take a short recess. We're off the record? Yeah, I'm sure that Mr. Snowden's not going to use up all the time.
I am All right, we are still discussing the public staff's load panel testimony, and I will ask you to back up very quickly to page 49 and say, do you see there
Is this
that
Mr. Fahey's testimony?
Yes, sir. This is Mr. Fahey and Mr. Thomas.
Okay.
Okay, and you see there that the public staff panel disagrees with the way Duke modeled its large load customer curtailment provisions and has some recommendations for how they should be modeled.
Yes, this testimony states that.
Okay, thank you. Could you turn to figure 9 on page 51 then? Okay, and again, I'm sorry for making you deal with drawing inferences out of tables here, but
I just want to note that in my copy, it says this figure is confidential.
oh dear. I think you are correct, Chair Brawley. I am so sorry. This does call for confidential information, and I profoundly apologize for not really that. I was about to discuss confidential information.
Okay. I'm not
think there
quite
is-
sure how we can't proceed with this line of questioning. And I think we're going to have, I believe, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong on this, we're going to have to edit the video that's kept. All right. So we've got to, at this point, let's just drop it.
Okay, I will drop that specific question. Based on this, without getting into any specifics, based on if you can answer this without revealing confidential information, would you agree that the estimated megawatts of curtailable large load discussed in Mr. Thomas's testimony represent an amount of megawatts that are comparable to in size, if not larger than all of Duke's other DSM programs combined, as represented in your testimony?
I don't know that I'm comfortable giving a direction of higher or lower. Looking at Duke's legal team.
Yeah, Duke legal team, do you think this is a question that can be answered without giving confidential information? If not, I will drop it.
I can also add that I just want to point out that these two tables, the one in our testimony and the one in Mr. Fay and Mr. Thomas's testimony, are measuring two different things. So I'm not sure how valuable a comparison is, since it's two completely separate types of programs.
All right, at this point, I'm going to stop. We're going to take a recess. And I think part of the problem is if we had something that was discovered later, we would be able to pull the video. Right now, we're still live. And so it's already gone out. We'll be able to edit what's posted later. Josh, would you come up here, please? So we're going to take 10 minutes. Okay, let's go back on the record. I'm going to end today's session. We are going to go into recess until 9:30 on Monday morning. At this point, we are in recess.